Billy.
I'm going to turn that on. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to Continuing Professional Education Services presentation today. We have a very good presentation. I think a presentation which is very timely based upon where we all are in the world today. So again, I am with Continuing Professional Education Services. Along with me is Julianne Masago, who's our Director of Operations, who always makes sure that people can get in and out of rooms. Though I don't think we've ever had a problem. People leave when they want to leave. So it works out very well. But we started this last month doing a monthly chat on the first Thursday of the month in something that is timely. Last month, we did remediation timeframe extensions, which was strictly for site remediation program. Today we are doing, and my coffee is being delivered. Thank you very much, Karen.
Stop showing off to them.
Morning, Karen.
Morning.
Sorry about that. And that was for a site remediation program. This month, we are doing something more on the liabilities and insurance line for those of us who are employers, employees, to get a basic understanding as to where we are in liability wise in this new world, as I keep calling it. And next month on May 6th, we have a discussion with George Berkowitz, who is my partner at Continuing Professional Education Services, an LSRP, and Steve Senior, an attorney at Riker Danzig, and they will be talking about the board, the Licensed Site Remediation Professional Board, and discussions of complaints and audits and the process and the penalties. So that's next month on May 6th. You can always check out all our programs at cpesnj.com. And those are my commercials for this morning. This is an open forum. If you have questions or comments, you can put them into the chat bar. You can raise your hand and I'll interrupt Adam and you can ask your question. We want to make sure that people get their questions answered as they come in. If you want to wait till the end, we'll have a Q&A at the end. Adam's presentation is about 30 to 40 minutes, depends upon how many burpees he did this morning and how well he's feeling. He is definitely my idol when it comes to getting up, getting out, and doing something every morning. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Adam Puharic, who is the president and the founder of the Puharic and Associates, a insurance agency in Wall Township, New Jersey. Wall Township or Manasquan?
Well, the physical location is Manasquan.
Manasquan, okay. Adam has had many lives similar to a cat, and in his past life, I always, this is a joke, but he's a graduate of Montclair. He has a master's from Montclair, right? And,
master's from Monmouth, undergrad from Montclair.
Okay. And he started his career standing next to Roger Ailes at Fox News, and taught him everything he knew. So he decided after that he had to go into liability insurance. But he's had many careers in between, the former Monmouth County Republican chairperson. And as an insurance agent, he specializes in professional liability and liability insurance for engineering companies, for professionals in environmental, in land use, and as well as having a personal line also. But really today, he's going to really talk to us on the professional side and how COVID has changed the world that we are. So I think that is enough of my 20-minute introduction of Adam. I will turn it over to you, Adam, and you can share your screen and give us your knowledge.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, CPES, for being the host of this event today. And everyone attending, thank you very much for your time. Does everyone see my presentation screen?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Sir.
Okay, good. So welcome. I want to be efficient. I want to go through this quickly so that we can get on with our days. But I'm going to attack some of the risks and threats that businesses just like you will face in the coming months. And what does the data tell us of what's happened over the past year and what I'm referring to as a post-COVID world? I am going to approach this from a risk manager standpoint rather than an HR standpoint. So some people that might have HR training or have that as their focus might take question with my attitudes or approach to the topics. But my thought is I'm trying to keep my employers and my business people out of lawsuits. So I approach it from that perspective and not necessarily from the employee perspective. So apologies in advance on that topic. Let's see. Phil gave us a great description. I will tell you that Puharic and Associates is proud to insure. It's now 34 engineers, architects, and environmental science firms, and it's something we love to do. And we are risk managers. And really what that means is that we love to approach our clients from a three-dimensional perspective. We want to do the insurance for their business, but most of the time we also are insuring the agency principals' homes and auto and umbrella and personal insurance because we want to attack their risk profile in total. We want to make sure that we understand what's happening to them from a risk management standpoint from the life of their business. This is not specific legal advice. It's a general overview of strategies and tactics that may prove useful. When in doubt, please consult an attorney, an accountant, or your own insurance agent, or reach out to us. A lot of the source comes from NJBIA Return to Work and also from Risk and Insurance Magazine. This slide is dense, but I'm gonna go through it quickly. And it's sort of the what do we know 1 year later? 1 year later, what are the emerging trends with claims, risk management, and for employers that have resulted from this COVID pandemic? And the first thing is employer practices liability claims. I will refer to that as EPLI. Discrimination, breach of contract, wage and hour violations, those lead the lawsuits that are coming, that are new as a result of that. And so we think about employment contract. What was the document that our employee and I agreed to when we hired them? And then what happened with the pandemic that prevented us as a firm from being able to live up to our end of that contract? How many hours are they working now versus how many hours did they think they were going to work? What is their compensation versus the long-term COVID impact on workers' compensation? So workers' compensation insurance, of course, deals with the insurance for your employees if they are injured on the job. When the pandemic started, many people were worried that there would be a high frequency of workers' compensation claims when every employee claimed to catch the COVID virus at the workplace. But instead, something different happened. That slew of claims never came in. Instead, there were isolated, what we refer to as long hauler claims. So 10 firms might have had 0 people apply for workers' compensation benefits as a result of what they assumed to be contracting the virus at the workplace. But then one person in a firm of 100 people might have had long-term effects as a result of the virus. And what this does in a practical sense for all of us, for our workers' compensation, is 3 years from 2020, 2023, the workers' compensation insurance policies of that company, the premiums will increase dramatically because workers' compensation is the result of frequency and severity of the claims, and it takes into account the preceding 48 months minus the immediate 12 months. So the people that are having those long hauler claims, they might not feel the impact for another 2 years, but their premiums and their policies are starting to rise. Management liability challenges. As a result of the virus, as a result of making our employees work from home, all these sorts of issues, there are challenges to firms that have partnerships, more than one executive officer, and it's triggering coverage events for directors and officers' policies. So what does that mean? What does it means for us that own companies, that have partnerships, that have multiple partners in our firms, that there needs to be a streamlined delineation of responsibilities. Which one of the officers, which one of the executives are responsible for COVID policies, for return to work policies? because otherwise it can result in officer versus officer lawsuits, triggering directors and officers coverage. Failure to educate claims. One of the biggest things that's happening that is not specific to employers in our industry is that across the states of the union, there are joint actions taking place against school systems, that the failure for kids to return back to school are resulting in lawsuits. These, though they're not directly related to our industries as employers, they will have outsized impacts down the road because they will trigger a type of coverage known as reinsurance. Simply put, everyone's policy, whether it be their homeowner's policy or their auto policy or their business liability policy, everyone's insurance policy purchases other insurance that would take care of catastrophic claims. This is known as reinsurance. And they purchase it from large international insurers like Zurich Re and Munich Re and Berkshire Hathaway. And so that reinsurance, they're very rarely triggered. An example of the last time reinsurance would have been triggered would have been the Superstorm Sandy. Superstorm Sandy was such a large scale event that it triggered reinsurance coverage across the tri-state area, right? And when reinsurance goes up, it means that everyone's insurance rates go up. And that's a trend that doesn't even have anything to do with whether the claim originated from your workplace or not. Claims against design professionals. This is very relevant to the organization that I'm speaking in front of today. One of the challenges that is happening is that when there were business lockdowns and workers were removed from construction sites, there is a frequency and an increase in claims related to design, to on time, on budget, to all of the construction management, engineering, and associated tasks. And in fact, for environmental scientists, if contracts had delivery requirements with a time-specific goal, those will then trigger claims when they're not produced on time, when the work is not done on time. It'll produce claims that will end up on your errors and omissions policy. And that's something that's coming out of there. Maintaining worker safety, ongoing trend. And I'm going to talk about that in a subsequent slide, but the purchases of PPE equipment, the change for employers in how they make the workplace, make a person responsible for cleaning their own workstation, have the employer responsible for cleaning the workplace. All of these changes are having impact on employers and small business budgets. And then work from home practices, I'll leave this slide with that, and I'll say that 25 to 30% of the workplaces studied will have some form of work from home continue on an ongoing basis after the pandemic is long gone. And I think that has hugely important insurance trends that we need to consider.
Adam, can I stop your flow for a second?
Phil.
I'm sorry. On the previous slide, and you had made a comment that on employers who have people out due to COVID, that in 3 years, we're going to see an impact of our workers' comp policy. If you were eligible for, and you have all these acronyms, this what's it, FFCRA, which was where you got reimbursed through payroll tax for that lost time, okay, for that lost income. Do you still think we're going to see that in 3 years on workers' comp, even though the government gave it back to us?
Oh, so great question, Phil. Thank you. So the answer is that let me just assume right now that everybody on the call is some version of environmental consultant or a scientist in some form or another, and that they have a workers' compensation policy, and their workers' compensation policies would be governed by a similar class code. And I'm just going to pick on class code 8601. So 8601, they will have payroll derived by that class code. Now, let's say there's 20 people on our call, and let's say only one firm has, or 20 hopefully, has a COVID long hauler. So one worker out of all of the people on this call is out for an extended period of time because of the ramifications and the after effects of COVID. And so that one worker chalks up tens of thousands of workers' comp claims for that one company, okay? So what happens is we all are governed by class code 8601, and we are all 20 of our firms will have an increase in our rates because of that one outside loss. Now that firm will have a double increase because they have the specificity of their own loss. So they will suffer because they suffered directly from that COVID incident, but all of us governed by 8601 will increase.
Thank you, Adam.
Okay, very good. Okay, this slide, this just in, the CDC's revising guidelines. It is de-emphasized the need to sanitize your office space, and it has re-emphasized the need to think about ventilation. Now, speaking to an organization, I hope mostly of employers and decision makers, I want to be really specific in what this means to me from an insurance standpoint. When the CDC changes its guidelines, it is pointing to a future of how your employees can sue you. In other words, when it tells you something is important, that means that future lawsuits will come from that direction. When it tells you something is less important, it means that if you should not focus on that area, but if you choose to focus on that area, even though we're telling you it's not important anymore, you better really know what you're doing, or else your employees will be able to sue you for that too. So again, I'm not an HR manager. I'm attacking this from a risk management standpoint. If the CDC tells me that I don't any longer have to sanitize my office, I want to quickly remove that from my COVID response policy at my workplace. And I want to remove the term sanitize, and I want to add just clean the office on a regular basis. Now, you can still make your workers responsible for cleaning their individual workspace and common areas like kitchens. You can still make wipes available and things like that. But removing the employer responsibility to sanitize the workspace, I think, is a priority right now because the CDC is tilting it in that direction. Now, second part of that slide, second part is the ventilation. The CDC is saying clearly to us that we think ventilation and distance between desks is going to be continue to be important. It's pointing to then a situation with, even when the pandemic is over, and mask requirements are over in the state of New Jersey, I would not rush to move desks back together to within 6 feet. I would, as an employer, I would really stress access to outside air and having windows open and ventilation and those kind of considerations. Those to me remain supreme and will remain important for the time being. This slide, I started this slide last March and I modified it. So New Jersey passed a law where they make COVID at the workplace a rebuttable presumption. What that in essence means is that if a worker approaches you and says, I think I caught COVID from your workplace, instead of the way the law should work, which should say, prove it, it makes it that the employee must be telling the truth and the employer has to spend their own money to prove that you didn't catch COVID at my workplace. So therefore, just the very allegation, if a worker says they caught COVID at your workplace, workers' comp has to open the claim and honor the claim. And the carrier and the employer would have to spend their money to prove that it didn't happen. This will have a slow trickling effect onto our workers' compensation over the course of a decade. And in essence, it acts like a tax. It pulls money out of the health insurance and healthcare system, out of the government responsibility system, and it shifts that money into the workers' compensation policy system. Again, this will be most impactful on long-haul COVID sufferers, or those people who claim to have long-term impacts as a result of catching the virus. So you will see then attorneys start to use a tactic of, well, you got to open a workers' comp claim. Open a workers' comp claim. We're not sure whether you caught it at Brilliant Environmental, but you got to open a workers' comp claim. this will trickle into our system. Every time you have these trends happening, there's basically three payers in America: the health insurance system, the government, or other insurances like workers' comp. And all of the bad things that happen to us are covered in one of those three universes. And so when you have changes in laws, it takes the money and it flows from one pile to another, right? Phil mentioned the credits that you might be getting as employers for people that are out. And that's the government taking on a loss, an economic loss, and paying it directly. When your health insurer is giving you free COVID tests or vaccine administration with no copay, that's the health insurer taking on that pile of money directly. And this is an example of the workers' comp industry taking on the COVID loss. So next, last point in this slide, which is kind of important to me, is that you have, right now, the data is pointing to only specific industries that are being impacted by COVID. Construction is one of them, because there were situations last year where you had people working in construction related firms and entities in inside spaces. And so there were a slew of illness and related claims coming from that. Other specific industries like the butcher, meatpacking industry, where people are in cold, wet environments indoors, those are tending to trend to have claims. Office environments are not trending. There is not a frequency of claims coming from that sort of world. So this is an interesting slide. It's a little fun and thought-provoking, and I'll have some people mad at me when I say this, but am I responsible for slips and falls for my workers that work from home? The simple answer is kind of, yeah, maybe. So workers' compensation has to take into account that if you as the employer tell your people to work from home, then their house is now an official work site. And as such, all employer laws, and it's funny, I'm not really sure where this ends up, but that would mean things like harassment and discrimination are sort of your responsibility to prevent those things from happening. And the other half of that is that you are responsible for maintaining a safe workspace. Now, I have a worksheet that I'm not tech savvy enough to be able to put up on our chat panel while we talk, but I will send it to Phil and anyone that wants it from me afterwards. There's something called a self-assessment. It's a one-page checklist that you could send all your workers who work from home on a permanent or semi-permanent basis. And it's a self-assessment of their workspace to make sure it has adequate lighting and egress and ingress, electric outlets that are functioning properly. And basically you send it to them. They check yes or no, that they have this, they have access, they can escape quickly, all these things, they feel safe, the temperature's regulated. And then you keep that on file as an employer that you've asked them these questions. That's really all you need to do as an employer, but to not do anything is not enough. And I guess that's my point of this slide. It is your responsibility, even when they work from home, to make sure they're safe, unfortunately.
So Adam, in what you just said, whether they're working from home 1 day, 5 days, 2 hours, or 3 hours, this checklist should be done.
Yeah, I mean, I did it for my people. And now look, let's talk about this, because I think this is interesting. What if your trusted, valued employee, to get away from the kids who are doing the homeschool and screaming at each other downstairs, goes up into the attic, which is an unfinished attic, to work because they want privacy and quiet and all that, and their pull down steps are rickety and falling apart? Does this mean you have to pay as an employer for new steps? No, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to say that. But what? But is there a reasonable accommodation that you as an employer could do? That's just a question to ask yourself. I'm not going to answer it. But if you ignore that a worker's saying, I hate working from home, Phil. I really don't feel sick. I don't like this and all that. And you don't make any kind of accommodation or attempt. And there's emails back and forth. And this person, now I think you're in trouble. And I think that's now, am I saying you have to buy them a new laptop? I'm not saying that. But I am saying that you have to ask questions and you have to see if there is an opportunity to make a reasonable accommodation for them. Right? And that's the key point for employers. This next slide is similar, but it deals with their actual computers. I am saying this directly to you. If you have your workers working from home on a 10-year-old desktop and you have not asked questions about whether they have cyber, antivirus, whether it's updated, upgraded, you are making a mistake. You are making a mistake if you have not figured out a game plan to make sure that their systems are secure. Okay. I have an IT company that works with my 5 employees, and I purchased virus software that we installed on everyone's home computer, and I pay a monthly fee for it. It's miserable. When I started my agency, I didn't wake up wanting to do that. But it is the most practical thing I could do because I have people's social securities, I have people's information, I have no choice. It's the cost of doing business. And please, please, please do not put your head in the sand and think it's not your responsibility. And again, a reasonable accommodation. So Phil's worker, very valuable to Phil's company, says, I have a 13-year-old desktop, it's falling apart. Does Phil have to buy him a new computer? No. Would I recommend Phil maybe give them an allotment or $500 towards a new laptop? Maybe. I think something has to be done. And I think that the conversation has to happen. Cyber liability, hot topic in my industry. Everyone really needs to be focused on this. And simply put, a cyber liability insurance policy protects others' data that you may have. So for many of the firms here on this call today, we're talking about your employees' social security numbers, your employees' personal information. If you have a health plan, let's say, and you're enrolling your workers or their spouses in your health plan, you keep that data somewhere, it can get hacked. If you get hacked, there's a national story going on right now that one of the major insurance companies in our country, CNA Insurance, was hacked on Palm Sunday, the Sunday before Easter. CNA is still down. CNA has billions of dollars of insured assets under management. And I have engineering clients that are in CNA. I was told by the underwriter of CNA that I could basically make up my own price for a renewal that's coming up, and they would honor it because they don't actually know. They don't know what they paid for insurance last year, so they trust me as an agent. So they've said, Adam, whatever you tell us the price is, that'll be the renewal price. They can't get into their files, and they are an insurance company. So cyber liability, critically important. Hacking pays for fines that you might be responsible. In my industry, I have the Department of Banking and Insurance. If I get your information, my client's files hacked, I am going to be fined by Department of Banking and Insurance. My cyber liability policy would pay for that. And then finally, I always tell this anecdote. I had a chiropractor, wonderful chiropractor. She gets hacked December 1st of 2020. She thinks it's a small problem. It was actually North Korea that hacks her. They encrypt all of her hard drives in one little chiropractic office in Wall Township, and they destroy $28,000 of computers. She doesn't really realize that that her agent bought her this cyber liability policy. So she goes and she has to replace every office terminal, desktop, the server, the router, and the cyber liability policy paid for that. So cyber liability, make sure you say cyber liability, and that's critically important. Employer liability. These tips are very practical. Make sure you have a handbook. Make sure that you are tuned in to CDC guidelines, and every week you check the CDC guidelines and you have someone responsible in your firm, whether you have a COVID return to work plan or a separate policy about returning to work, that you check the CDC guidelines weekly. Employer practices liability protects you from lawsuits like harassment, unsafe workplace, failure to promote, wrongful termination, age discrimination, basically any lawsuit that an employer could be held responsible for. That's employer practices liability. Many of us have built-in coverage on our business owners' policies. These are inadequate, and you will get yourself in trouble. My strongest recommendation, invest in a standalone policy with real $1 million limits. Be resilient or die. So this slide is very simple. What have we learned as employers? We've learned that it's important, even after mandates are lifted, that we have a non-punitive policy towards our workers, that if they need to work from home, if they feel that someone in their family might have symptoms or they're uncomfortable, or someone in your workplace got symptoms and so they want to stay and work from home, we have to have a non-punitive policy. Even when you start to get frustrated as an employer and you feel that people are using the opportunity to continue work from home processes, be forgiving, be flexible. The law is not on your side. Keep that in mind. And this will go on for at least the rest of the calendar year. Caring for others. Make sure your leave policies contains provisions to allow the workers flex time, work from home, family leave when caring for others. Keep the learnings, keep the opportunities that you have found out about how to work from home, keep them going. If there's a summer tropical storm, reinstitute your work from home policy. Say, everybody, stay home, we're gonna work from home. Keep the technology going so that if we should ever have to re-enter into a lockdown phase, that you are not rebuilding your systems from scratch. There'll be winter snowstorms. There'll be other things that happen to us employers. We have invested in these opportunities to work from home. Let's not let them rust when the pandemic is over. Cross-train. Most of us do this instinctively, but one of the most prominent lessons is to make sure that you are too deep in every job requirement, because you now have less reliability on knowing whether your people are going to come to work, whether they're going to be forced to work from home, or they're going to have to work from home for 10 days because they're quarantining. And so the opportunity to cross-train and make sure that you have redundancies in your systems is more prominent than ever in the post-COVID world. And then finally, replace you. And I speak to every business owner and every executive that wears multiple hats. The most important conversations I've had over the past year were when my employers themselves contracted the virus, and I had to talk to them about what could happen if they actually ended up in an intensive care unit. And we would actually go over what are the specific job tasks that you do, whether it be billing, whether it be paying vendors. What do you do that nobody else in this business does? God bless you. And how do you replace yourself? You need to think about it. If anything else has happened from this, and it is the message that we need to think long and hard about how to replace ourselves. Fun little slide. What can an employer do to not get sued? The quick answer is nothing. There's nothing you can do to not get sued. But I can't stress, as infections go down, many of us will want to restore our business practices to the pre-COVID world. I'm urging you to continue to follow state guidelines, continue to listen, be educated on state guidelines, as painful as they may be, as annoying and counterproductive to our business lives as they may be. They will determine whether you have protections from lawsuits. And the simple concept is there's simple negligence and there's gross negligence. In every lawsuit, no matter what we do for a living, simple negligence, these things are commonly referred to as accidents, meaning I tried to do everything right, but a bad thing happened. Simple negligence is the kind of a lawsuit that usually will just result in your insurance policy paying some sort of loss. Gross negligence is different. Gross negligence is I knew there was a rule I should be following. I purposefully didn't follow it, or I was willfully ignorant to the fact that I should have been following it. Gross negligence are the type of lawsuits that can tap your personal wealth and go above and beyond your insurance coverage. Make sure we maintain that if you feel sick, stay home policies. The guidelines keep varying back and forth between 10 days and 14 days. But we have to remember that we want to allow people to self-isolate if they have symptoms, and maintain your work from home policies if possible. Spread out. No discretionary travel. Now, this is something that I'm going to just put a little question mark rather than an exclamation point next to this bullet point. You know your business better than I. Follow the guidelines on travel. Follow the CDC's guidelines on travel. And if travel is a critical part of your business, then it has to be done. But be patient with the needs for discretionary travel to trade shows outside of New Jersey and things like that. Be thoughtful about it. I'm here to help you walk through those process. I believe using good hygiene is here to stay. I believe that all of us need to keep budgeting for having wipes, for making policies about workers needing to wipe down their own workspaces, needing to wipe down the kitchenettes when they get a cup of coffee and things. I don't think that's going away. And then ventilation over sanitation. That's brand new this week. And it's a slide that I think is going to be relevant to us. I want to end on an optimistic note. Be prepared to win. For a year, we've been so focused on surviving, adjusting. Phil called it the new world and things like that. But a day may come where our business revenue returns, when we get a pop of growth, when things open up even more. And I would just like everyone out there to remember, don't just sit there. Plan for victory. Plan to have that business grow. Prioritize the sales calls. I will tell you, as an insurance person, there will be a portion of my meetings that will stay virtual forever. I've actually found them to be valuable. If I review an existing policy with an existing policyholder, and I do it on a Zoom call and I share a screen with their insurance policy, they tend to concentrate more than if I'm in person with them. When I'm in person with them, we get distracted. We talk about other things. We talk about our families. We have a good time. I will keep a portion of my sales meetings virtual forever. It actually saves gas. It saves time, prevents me from having to travel back and forth. It has become part of my business process. Work now on developing processes for attending conferences, policies. Make sure you know what you're going to do. What are you going to tell your people if they're at a 4-day conference in Miami, Florida, and on the third day they spike a fever? Are you prepared to fly them home, to keep paying their hotel bill? If they have to self-isolate, how are they getting back to New Jersey, Pennsylvania, the East Coast? Think about those things. Spend time on your policies. Keep your work from home practices going. In the insurance industry, we've evolved towards eDoc, ePay. We've really grasped onto those technologies, and they are never going away. They have helped my industry to be able to get our client the insurance they want quicker and faster. No more driving to a client's house to get a deposit on a policy or something like that. It's now ePay. Adopt these strategies. Use some sort of e-sign doc for your contracts with the people that you work with. That's really the end of my presentation. I think I got it to 40 minutes. I'm hopeful that we got some value out of this. I'm going to stop sharing and open the floor to conversation or questions. And I thank you for everybody staying on the call with me. I'm very grateful for your time.
Okay. If anybody has any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask the question or put it in chat and I can read it to Adam. One question I wanted to go back to, Adam, though, while people are unmuting themselves or thinking of questions. Now you made the comment, and you made it a couple of times, that the CDC has recently changed their protocol on sanitation, on sanitizing, things, and that we should update our policies in our offices. But you also said that they've kind of re-expressed and expressed the requirements for ventilation. If I read between the lines, are you saying that if we don't have a policy on ventilation or haven't done anything on ventilation, that we have a concern that we should do something?
That's exactly
I mean,
right.
I can open all the windows in the office. That'll work today, but that's not going to work on December 15th.
So let's imagine a modern office building that's completely sealed with no outside air, okay? And let's imagine a situation where an employer on their own moves ahead with a return to work policy that brings 100% of their workers back into the office, let's say prior to New Jersey officially lifting all mandates and restrictions, all right? This employer has created a sole negligence opportunity for a future lawsuit. They have went ahead of the regulating bodies and made a decision for their workforce that is prior to the government and the authorities that regulate things like workspaces and workplace safety, OSHA and CDC. They have gone ahead and they have created an opportunity for gross negligence. So now let's go to ventilation. You're a tenant of your office. You don't own the building, you're a tenant, all right? And the air conditioned systems are going and you've returned 100% of your workforce back to the office. At a minimum, I believe every employer on this call needs to have a conversation with their landlord, if they're not the owner of their building, about what the landlord is doing to improve the ventilation of that building. What is the process for changing filters in the air conditioned units? What type of filters they use? And this could be as simple as an email chain discussion back and forth. Now, there may be things beyond our control because of our leases with our landlord. There may be things that the landlord is responsible for versus the tenant is responsible. But if we don't ask, if we don't check in, if we don't make ourselves educated on the topic, based on what the CDC has said this week, I believe we create an opportunity for gross negligence in the future. And we need to think that through. We need to become educated on the topic of office ventilation. Now, for some of the firms on this call, there may be a business opportunity in this. There may be firms that specialize in this area of workplace, office, air quality, things like that. So what I'm saying is that we can no longer be willfully ignorant on this topic of how we would address ventilation. And any attempt to address ventilation, whether it be a policy about maintaining open windows if your building allows for it, I think that those are smart policies. I think that it doesn't mean that you're the content expert. It means that you're attempting to address. And when we look at lawsuits, we think of the prudent person rule, which is that a jury of 12 sits there and they're asked by the judge, what would a prudent person have done in this situation? And the answer is frequently, it's not nothing, it's something, okay? And any attempt for an employer to address air quality in the office place now, I think is good. And it's protective of that firm.
I don't want to monopolize. Any questions from people? Chat questions or unmute yourself. I don't see anybody waving their hands frantically. I want to go back to, I took some notes. One, if you do share that checklist with me, I will make sure to share it with everybody. I think that's a vital tool that we all can use. Some small firms may or may not have insurance outside of general liability insurance or professional insurance for what they do. And, as you were talking, thinking about the EPLI insurance policy, in everything on the scenarios you talked about with dealing with employees, is all of that going to, outside of workers' comp, is all of that going to be covered by your EPLI when it comes to, complaints about you didn't protect me with sanitation, you didn't protect me with clean surfaces, you put me 3 feet from the person is that all going to fall under your EPLI, or will any of that flow to your general?
Oh, that's a great question. So the overwhelming majority will be handled by your EPLI policy, the overwhelming majority. And in 90% of those cases, what will happen is that your policy will hire an attorney who will quickly move to settle with the aggrieved party prior to any sort of trial, or court or judge will just quickly reach out and say, hey, we take $25,000 and be happy with that, because the carriers, the insurance industry is so deathly afraid that juries will award in favor of ill employees, of COVID long haul employees, that they will not let it get to trial. So that's 90%. Now, there is one situation that could tap our general liability policies. And that is not necessarily our industry, but some of the people on this call might have a shop or a warehouse or a place where they store remediation tools and trailers and equipment. So there could be an instance where a worker sues and says that I received, not a worker, but a third-party contractor, subcontractor coming into your place to work with your employees, could say that I contracted the virus by helping your employee take the trailer out and there was no cleaning. So that would be general liability, because it would be bodily injury that resulted as a result of the operations of the firm. So therefore, if we think about using your equipment or bringing third-party vendors into our workplace, like even, I know it sounds silly, but the FedEx delivery guy, I don't think he should come into your offices. I hate to be mean, and I like my FedEx guy. I think he's a nice guy. But for this time, I have to have a table outside my office, because he could make an argument that he contracted the virus by touching my door handle, and that's a general liability claim.
I don't like that answer, but
I'm sorry.
sorry, I'm being honest.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm looking for that. The policy on the work from home checklist. I will get that for you, Phil.
Yeah, if you send that to me, I'll get that out to everybody.
Yeah.
But I'm sure many of us who are not working from home have people coming in and out of the office, let it be the mailman, the FedEx guy, the lab delivery guy dropping off coolers, the print guy dropping off prints. So, God forbid one of them says that we got them sick. You're now saying, unbeknownst to us, we could have a general policy. Okay.
So
General claim.
I'm very sorry, and I don't want to be the wet blanket of the world, but I will tell you that in the American legal system, it's precedence that governs all of those things. And so prior to there being a coronavirus, judges would normally throw out cases where, let's say, a mom brought their child to a preschool, and at the preschool, the child contracted a flu virus from another child, and the mom tried to sue the preschool. The judges would normally throw that out because contracting viruses from one another is part of the human condition and is not unique to a workplace. And therefore, unless the school owner acted grossly negligent, did something on purpose, those lawsuits were never allowed to stand. It's too early for me to say this definitively, but in some of the more outrageously impractical states like California and New York, there are lawsuits that are being allowed to continue where you just replace the word flu virus with coronavirus, and the workplaces are being forced to defend themselves in situations that were never, that a judge would never allow to go in advance. And these are dangerous times for employers. So when I think about third-party vendors like the FedEx guy, I think that we have to be careful. And he's not our employee. And we might like the person, but we should sort of greet them outside for the time being. And I can't stress, and we have to be careful about bringing clients into our conference room prior to guidelines being restricted.
As I'm waiting for my client to get here at 9 o'clock.
Nah,
Don't tell my insurance agent.
I won't.
Again, we are at 8:57. We are very cognizant of everybody's time and schedules, especially on a Thursday, because we want to make sure that everybody gets home early to celebrate Thursday night. That's the day before Friday. And if we've learned anything since COVID started, every day is the same day. Dick just put up there, some organizations are requiring a COVID liability release be signed by outsiders in advance by anyone entering premises for an activity meeting. Will these stand up?
Great question. So that's a state by state question. In many of the more practically legal states, the South, the West, these will be valid and useful. In some of the more progressive states, when an individual signs, a lot of times their attorneys can break that waiver of release by basically claiming that the person wasn't smart enough to figure out what they were signing and didn't really understand it. And so while I would think if I was running a indoor baseball turf center and batting cages, would I be advising my customer, my client, to have children sign a waiver? Yes, I would be telling them to have them sign a waiver right now. Do I really think that protects 100% of their risk? No. I would think that the other things we talked about today, like maintaining cleaning protocols, like having a policy where if your workers have symptoms that you keep them self-isolated for 10 days and don't let them come back, I would think that keeping a log of those kind of activities would show you to be the prudent person and protect you. By, unfortunately, and it's something like a batting cage, doing temperature checks for the children entering the facility. I think those are better processes than not instituting them. Right. And those plus a waiver make a more protective environment. The waiver in and of itself means nothing if you do nothing else.
So in other words, build your levels of protection. So, okay. It is now 8:59. So great answer. Again, and Adam said it in the beginning. I know we do have some attorneys on the call. Adam's not giving you legal advice in any situations at all. We always should go to our attorneys for that type of legal advice. But I think on the liability and the protection end and insurance end, I think Adam has done a fantastic job at outlining those things that will help protect us on a daily basis as business employees, as owners, operators, and in the work from home still has me shuddering a little. But I think we all should think about that, and also think about the fact if you have your employees working from home, you don't have to worry about, well, I'll assume we don't have to worry about the people who are coming and going in their house because it's their house, though you did say we have some responsibility there if it's the business setting. So just depressing. But anyway, that's the world we've lived in for the past year, 14 months, 13 months. I see no more questions. Adam, appreciate your time. Again, we will post this on our website, which is cpesnj.com. You can see it till the end of time. We do have our next program like this on May 6th, and that will be on the board, the LSRP board audit and complaint process. In Adam's slides, you have his contact information. Reach out to him. He is a fantastic resource. And he also spends about 99% of his day talking. So if you have questions, comments, opportunities, definitely reach out to him. He will definitely respond to you.
Really appreciate everybody's time, and thank you for staying on the call.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. And follow him on LinkedIn because he likes LinkedIn.
I do like LinkedIn.
Thanks again, everybody. Everyone have a safe
Thank you.
day. Be well out there.
And Phil, I'm emailing